It's 3:45 in the morning. Marcus is awakened by the sound of keys rattling. He's been locked up for 3 months in a county jail, waiting for his court date. But tonight, a guard is standing at his door with a clipboard.
Pack your things. You're being moved.
Marcus barely has time to put on his shoes before he's cuffed at the wrists and ankles and loaded onto a bus with 20 other men. No one tells them where they're going. 3 hours later, the bus pulls up to a compound surrounded by barbed wire and searchlights. What Marcus doesn't know is that this prison, owned and operated by a private corporation, receives around $120 per day from the federal government for every filled bed. In the industry, it's called per diem billing. The longer Marcus stays locked up, the more money the prison will make. He wasn't convicted, he's still presumed innocent. But the system doesn't care, and Marcus is now a profitable unit. In a concrete office, a shift supervisor ticks a box on a spreadsheet. The facility is back at 92% capacity in order to avoid a penalty clause in its government contract. Marcus is taken to his new cell with a torn mattress and a broken toilet. Everyday citizens like him are locked up, transferred, and warehoused, not because it's necessary, but because it's profitable. And the deeper you look, the darker it gets. This is the evil design of prisons for profit. To understand how the United States ended up with for-profit prisons, we need to go back to the 1980s. Under President Ronald Reagan, the federal government launched what would become a full-scale war on drugs. New laws were passed at breakneck speed, mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes policies, and stricter parole guidelines. Billions of dollars were funneled into law enforcement, prosecution, and incarceration. Arrests surged, courts became overwhelmed, and the prison system started to overflow. At the same time, Reagan was pushing another agenda, shrinking government by outsourcing public services to the private sector. The idea was simple. Private companies could do the government's job more efficiently. That belief didn't stop at highways or schools. It was extended to something far more controversial: prisons. In 1983, a group of businessmen saw a lucrative opportunity. They founded Corrections Corporation of America, the first major private prison company in the US. Their pitch was radical. Let us run your prisons. We'll build them, staff them, and manage them. All the government has to do is keep them full. Their first real contract was with the Immigration and Naturalization Service. CCA promised to turn an old, run-down hotel in Houston into a fully functioning immigration detention facility in just 90 days. Somehow they pulled it off, and it started a chain reaction. Private prison companies were multiplying. Investors saw potential, and Wall Street took notice. GEO Group, CCA's biggest competitor, entered the scene. By the late 1990s, private prison stocks were soaring. Correctional facilities were being built faster than schools, and with a lot more money behind them. At this point, the system wasn't just reacting to overcrowding, it was scaling up incarceration as a business strategy. It was no longer about public safety, but about profit margins. Between 1980 and 2000, America's prison population quadrupled. While public prisons were weakening, private ones were expanding. By 2009, over 129,000 people were housed in private facilities. Most people stop at the statistics, but if you look past the headlines, you already know something deeper is at play. We've built a space for those who demand the full truth about how governments and corporations really operate, how they keep you poor, their hidden agendas and patterns they hope you'll never notice. Click the first link in the description and watch our exclusive breakdown to reveal all the secrets they keep. As the industry grew, so did the need to maintain appearances. A system built to generate profit couldn't look like a machine for human suffering, at least not from the outside. So private prison companies leaned into a different narrative. They claimed they were not just running prisons, but improving them with more efficiency, better rehabilitation, and safer conditions. They promise taxpayers a better deal and a lifeline for struggling cities. In towns hit hard by factory closures and unemployment, a new prison is pitched like a rescue plan, ensuring hundreds of jobs and high starting pay. On paper, it looks like the facility exists to serve the community. But that's only half the story. In reality, the people running these prisons aren't building safer facilities. They're cutting corners wherever they can. Officers are hired quickly, trained briefly, and thrown into overcrowded cell blocks with barely any support. Entire wings are left unguarded for hours. Former employees speak of burnout as inevitable. They quit not because the job was hard, but because the system was designed to chew them up and move on. Because in this business, the less you spend on staff, the more money you make. When it comes to healthcare behind bars, private prisons don't see it as their responsibility. In many facilities, one nurse is responsible for treating hundreds of inmates, sometimes entire housing units by themselves. They rush from cell to cell with a clipboard, checking vitals like they're scanning barcodes. After 5 p.m., most private prisons don't offer any on-site medical staff overnight. If someone has a stroke or a mental breakdown after hours, they're often told to wait until morning, assuming they survived the night. Chronic illnesses are treated like background noise. People with asthma, diabetes, heart conditions, or open wounds are told to fill out a request form, and then they should wait.
It's not important to be healthy there. You know that new medications are first tested on animals and then on prisoners. Many men in prison who are 20 years old die of kidney failure because of these pills they are tested on. There were no doctors. We went through COVID without any doctors. First, they tested the animals in the zoo, and only then us. That was roughly 10 months after COVID had started.
One CoreCivic facility, a man named Jean Carlos Jimenez spent weeks spiraling into a mental health crisis. He stopped speaking and often hallucinated. Guards and nurses walked past his cell repeatedly until May 15, 2017, when he hanged himself with a bedsheet. But nothing changed. Now let's talk about food, if you can even call it that. Meals are prepared for just over $1 each. In some facilities, the meat is spoiled. The milk is expired. One inspection at a GEO Group prison found food labeled not for human consumption being served to inmates. No penalties were issued, and the company kept its contract. Sanitation is no exception. Mold in the showers, rats in the kitchen. Inspectors across multiple facilities have documented these serious violations and still approved them to keep operating without consequence. Then how is all of this allowed to continue? The answer lies not just in who runs these prisons, but in who owns them. Two of the largest financial firms in the world, BlackRock and Vanguard, are also two of the biggest shareholders in both CoreCivic and the GEO Group. They don't operate prisons or appear in headlines about inmate abuse, but their never-ending budgets are deeply connected to the private prison industry. Their involvement is not a matter of speculation or conspiracy. It is printed in shareholder filings and reports, laid out plainly in the data that almost no one reads. These are not secret stakes or offshore accounts. They are official positions, publicly declared and renewed quarter after quarter. Yet the system works precisely because so few people pay attention to where ownership really sits. BlackRock and Vanguard don't need to publicly announce they use incarcerated people for profit, but to present it as a healthy investment for their clients. Since these firms represent mutual funds, pension accounts, and state-managed retirement systems, much of the money being funneled into this industry doesn't come from boardrooms. It comes from taxpayers. As the federal government pays for every inmate, the money passes through CoreCivic and GEO Group on its way to shareholders. If you live in the United States and have a retirement plan, there's a very real chance that a portion of your future is tied to the performance of a private prison. It's shocking how something this inhumane can seem so normal. But that's why we build our community, where we expose the dark and evil truths the government tries to keep hidden. Click the first link in the description below, and you'll get access to our exclusive investigation of BlackRock and Vanguard strategies to control the world. You will also have the opportunity to get in the shoes of an investigator with our weekly cases and training quizzes. Everything we share is grounded in verified research and hours of hard work. So while CoreCivic and GEO Group appear to be the ones responsible for the visible harm, the real weight of the system rests higher up, held in place by investors who never have to answer for what their money makes possible. But what if they did have to answer? What if someone tried to challenge the system? Maybe a small town official who doesn't want to stay quiet. Here comes the corruption. Let's start with the United States, where CoreCivic and GEO Group have spent over $35 million lobbying politicians, not to make prisons safer, but to keep them full, and it gets worse. The formula is simple. Tougher laws mean longer sentences, and longer sentences mean higher profits. And when crime drops, they panic because some of their contracts guarantee 90 to 100% occupancy, forcing states to either fill the cells or pay for them anyway. Between 2003 and 2008, in Pennsylvania, 2 judges, Michael Conahan and Mark Schiavarella, were convicted in the Kids for Cash scandal after taking nearly $3 million in bribes from private juvenile facilities in exchange for sentencing thousands of children, some for petty crimes, others for no crime at all. Their prison beds needed bodies, and the judges delivered. In Florida, a state audit revealed CoreCivic charged taxpayers $16 million more than public prisons would have cost, while simultaneously cutting staff, slashing medical care, and locking women in freezing cells with no heat, no hygiene supplies, and no medications. Meanwhile, in the UK, private firms Serco and G4S signed multi-billion-pound deals to tag released prisoners. But between 2005 and 2013, they billed the Ministry of Justice for tags on people who were dead, already back in jail, or never even fitted. They claimed bonuses for transporting inmates to courtrooms, which never happened. Even in South Africa, G4S staff at the Mangaung prison were exposed for drugging inmates with antipsychotics against their will and violently abusing them. The attacks were carried out by a special unit called the Ninjas, whose job was to break anyone who caused problems. In 2013, the government stepped in, saying G4S had lost control. And in Australia, entire states began canceling contracts after realizing that private prisons delivered worse outcomes with less oversight. So next time you hear about a new, tough-on-crime law or another prison being built, remember there's something much darker behind it.